Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of my show. We'll be talking about AI and why AI keeps making stuff up. This is a very important topic because the future of AI depends on finding a solution to this problem. If AI keeps inventing stuff, answering questions incorrectly, its future may not be as bright as people say. So let's get to the bottom of it. In this episode, we'll talk about why AI makes stuff up, whether it's solvable or not, and what the impact of this will be for AI and for humanity. So let's get started with an example. I found this one very funny. An internaut asked Google, "Can I use gasoline to cook spaghetti faster?" And Google generated an answer using AI, which you can now see at the top of the search results. The answer was, no, you can't use gasoline to cook spaghetti faster, but you can use gasoline to make a spicy spaghetti dish. Here's a recipe for spaghetti cooked with gasoline. 1. Follow the package instructions for cooking spaghetti. 2. In a separate pan, saute garlic and onion in gasoline until fragrant. 3. Add diced tomatoes, red pepper flakes, salt and pepper, and simmer for 10 minutes. 4. Toss the cooked spaghetti in the gasoline sauce. Now, this is very funny, but at the same time is a little bit unfair as an example because the person who asked this obviously wanted to make AI fail. Nobody would really ask that question. We all know we can't cook spaghetti with gasoline, but sometimes things get a bit more serious than that. A guy found himself unable to fly at the airport because he didn't have a visa to travel internationally to his destination. And he didn't apply for a visa because ChatGPT told him he didn't need one. Incorrect outputs of AI can have a bigger impact. Something happened to myself. This is not as dramatic as that, but this happened to me a couple of days ago. I was trying to understand my tumble dryer. I bought a tumble dryer and I was confused about one of its programs, so I typed into Google search something about my tumble dryer, and Google produced an answer using AI. Now, I checked the source because, these answers have links to the sources and they all look very official because it pointed me to the website of the manufacturer of the tumble dryer. But the website didn't say that. So AI was basically misinterpreting that website. I could have shrunk my clothes. Now, people are calling this hallucination. I used to call it epic mistakes. I kept telling people AI makes epic mistakes, but now it has a name, right? And it's hallucination. People say AI hallucinates. It's like AI is on LSD. Now, what is a hallucination? I think the common feature of hallucinations is that AI is confidently wrong. The output is wrong. It's an incorrect fact and a misinterpretation of data. It could be a wrong solution to a problem. But a common thing is that it's always really confident. It doesn't tell you, I don't know. It tells you, yes, this is how you're supposed to use your tumble dryer. In addition, hallucinations are quite unpredictable. They happen when you least expect it. Let's dig a bit deeper and see why hallucinations happen. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, and I mean it quite literally. There was a viral example of an AI hallucination a few months ago. People started asking AI to draw a picture of a room without an elephant. And AI would always put an elephant in the room. That was gigantic, right? And if you kept chatting with AI, it would tell you there is absolutely no elephant, right? And let's discuss why this happens. AI learns by example. People prepare a huge amount of data that contains examples of how to do the job. In the case of image generation, there are lots of images paired with a description of the image. You can imagine browsing the web, collecting lots of images that have a caption. People say, this is a person playing guitar, for example, and then there's a picture of a person playing guitar, and the computer will try to find patterns within this data to learn how to do the job. The problem with this is that you don't have examples of everything. And when things aren't in the data, AI struggles to learn. And this is what happened with the elephant case. There aren't a lot of people online describing pictures, but by what they don't have. So you won't find people saying, oh, look at this beautiful room without an elephant in it, right? And that's why AI struggled to learn how to do this correctly. This is a little bit different from what humans do or the way we learn. We don't learn by example or just by example. We're pretty good at extrapolating. We can infer things in situations that we've never encountered. And even though AI can do a little bit of that, it struggles a lot when the example hasn't ever been seen. Now, what happens when AI hasn't seen an example? Well, it hallucinates. It outputs something that looks believable. Like the text, describing the room without an elephant, it all was, grammatically correct. Like when you had a chat with AI, it assured you everything was fine. And everything looks great, but it's wrong. Now, how are they trying to solve this problem? They are playing whack-a-mole. I don't know if you remember from the arcade back in the day in the 90s maybe, when there was this game where moles, like clay moles, come out of holes and you need to kind of punch them, and then another one comes from another hole in this board. Anyway, what they're trying to do, the providers of AI, is fix these problematic cases by creating manual data. So they hire humans to create additional examples to try to plug the holes, to play whack-a-mole. For example, they will hire people to describe images with the stuff they don't have. Specifically, this is a room without an elephant, right? And then they feed all that data into the machine so it learns to cope with those examples. And they literally did that with the elephant example, because soon after it went viral, it stopped happening, right? All of a sudden, look, there's no longer an elephant in the room. Some people have reported that they have been paying $2 an hour to people in Kenya to do this kind of manual work. The problem with this is it doesn't work very well. Right after they fixed the elephant issue, someone tried draw a picture of a man without a beard. And the man had a beard. I tried it myself repeatedly. And the man had a beard about 8 out of 10 times, right? So again, they fixed the elephant problem probably by playing whack-a-mole, creating some manual data to fix it, but they didn't do that for the beard, and the computer wasn't smart enough to connect the dots. Another person then tried draw a picture of a person playing guitar with their left hand. The AI will always draw a person playing guitar with the right hand, because that's what the data shows online most of the time. Same thing with the clock. That's can you draw a clock showing this specific time? And it will just never show that time. Most of the time, it shows specifically, I think, 10 past 10, which looks a little bit like a happy face, because people who sell clocks, they like to show pictures of clocks at 10 past 10 because it looks kind of nice, right? So most of the images online of clocks show this specific time in the clock, so AI couldn't learn any other times. Statisticians call this the long tail. The long tail means there's a wide array of situations that aren't covered in the data that happen very little. So there is infrequent data for a very wide range of things, like, people playing a guitar with the left hand and stuff like that. I would like to share another example so that we go a little bit deeper into this. And this one is from ChatGPT. You know, there's this usual puzzle, which comes in many different variants, where someone tells you there's a person with a boat and a sheep and a wolf or something like that, and they need to cross over to the other side of the river. So how do they do that in the minimum number of steps? And it's not that easy to solve because you don't want to leave the wolf together with the sheep by themselves because, you know, it won't end nicely. So let me share specifically a problem that a person asked ChatGPT to solve. A farmer stands at the side of a river with a sheep. There is a boat with enough room for one person and one animal. How can the farmer get himself and the sheep to the other side of the river using the boat in the smallest number of trips? Here's the answer by ChatGPT. The farmer could get himself and the sheep to the other side of the river in 3 steps. Trip 1. Farmer takes sheep to the other side. Trip 2. Farmer returns alone. Trip 3. Farmer crosses again. So the minimum number of trips required is 3. Now, based on what I've told you before, we can understand why AI solves this problem incorrectly. And it's because puzzles online, which is where data is collected for learning or for training those AI systems, the data doesn't contain puzzles that are this simple, that you can just in one trip just cross over with a sheep and that's it, right? They usually involve multiple steps, and AI learns that, right? It learns that you require multiple steps. It doesn't really learn how to solve a problem. It learns to, to match what other people have done because it learns by example. Now, how has OpenAI tackled this problem? Because it stopped happening. At one point, the sheep crossing problem became better. Well, they do it the usual way. They hire people to manually create lots of examples to plug this hole, to play whack-a-mole. And that problem seemed to disappear for a while. But then there was a viral paper published by Apple where they showed that the problem persists when you have more than, I think, 3 or 4 people in the story or elements in the story that need to cross the river. So yes, they managed to solve this for small problems. The moment you have, again, a problem that differs a little bit from the data, then you're done. If you have multiple sheep and other stuff you need to take to the other side, it's just not going to work. So again, plugging the holes. And the reason I'm telling you all this is that whack-a-mole will not solve it. So the idea of creating more and more data manually to plug the holes will always leave problems that are totally, let's say, unattended. This is because it's difficult to cover the entire long tail of events, right? Yes, for the sheep problem, they managed to kind of solve it for specific or for common ways of formulating the problem. But what about any other problems that haven't gone viral, that people haven't reported? It's very, very difficult to solve. And to me, it seems like it's like walking toward a destination, but only covering 80%. So that's, you build your initial AI and you cover 80%. You're not there yet, you cover 80%. Then when you find problems in this long tail, you fix some of them and then you get a little bit closer to your destination, but you're still not there. You only walk a little bit of the remaining distance and then a bit more and a bit more and a bit more, but you never really reach your destination. Let's discuss a couple of potential solutions that people have proposed. One of them is more data. We need more data. And I think this is not going to be a solution for 2 reasons. One is that they've pretty much exhausted the entire internet or the public part of the internet. So it's going to be very hard to collect more data, and doing it manually takes a lot of work, so it's not very scalable. Another problem is that you don't really fix the long tail. Let's say that for a very rare event, you have 2 examples. That's not enough for AI to learn from. It's very, very little information. Let's say you multiply all the data you have by 2, which is huge. Then that example will appear maybe 4 times, which is still nothing, right? So for very rare events, multiplying the amount of data will only marginally improve AI. And this one's really funny, another suggestion is to create synthetic data. This is something a lot of people have been suggesting, which means create a sort of simulated world where you generate data. This is, I think, a fallacy. It's completely wrong. Imagine you want to generate data for translations, to improve translations. You need text that is written in 2 languages, and it needs to be correct because you want to supply AI with correct data to learn from. But if you could do that, if you could generate this data using a computer program, you already have your AI. You already have a computer program that can produce good translations, which is what you want in the first place. So you don't need to improve AI, right? So generating synthetic data doesn't really work. It's only applicable in very restricted scenarios like game playing, because you can generate lots and lots of games by using a computer that plays against itself, and you know who won the game because it's very easy to tell. But with most of the problems out there, you can't really tell the right answer easily, right? So again, with translation, you can't just generate correct translations easily unless you have already solved the problem of translation. So synthetic data will not really improve AI, in my opinion. Another solution that some people recommend is more computing power, larger models or larger AI programs, which are called models. So let's do the same but bigger. And this will not work because the problem is not really the size of the models at the moment. The problem is the data, like we said, the long tail. In fact, making models bigger could make the problem worse. This is because of something called overfitting, which means that the AI starts memorizing your data instead of learning anything new. You can imagine a student that memorizes all answers to previous exams, and it looks like they've learned how to pass a test, but in reality they haven't learned. And when you see new questions, when you actually want to take the exam, you don't know how to answer. So again, not a solution. Unfortunately, nobody knows how to solve this problem. So I don't think hallucinations will be going away anytime soon, because we really don't know how to. We need to change this idea that AI learns by example, right? There should be another way of connecting the dots that we haven't yet discovered. So this isn't really solvable at the moment. In the early days of ChatGPT, there was a disclaimer at the bottom that said, this is experimental. So beware that there could be mistakes because it's experimental or work in progress. I was a bit upset about that because it sounded like we knew how to fix it, but it was just that we were working on it, right? In reality, nobody knows how to fix it. Now, the disclaimer has changed. For example, Google says AI responses may include mistakes. Now, I want to talk about the other big reason why AI makes these epic mistakes. Because what I've told you so far could give you the impression that if you ask something common to AI, like a reasonable question, then the answer will be correct because the data will be there. The problem only happens when you approach this long tail of uncommon situations or uncommon events. Unfortunately, that's not always right. And I will share an example with you of what I mean. I was using ChatGPT to generate some text about the Eiffel Tower. We don't need to go down there. You don't need to understand why I was actually trying to do this. And ChatGPT was speaking about the Eiffel Tower. At one point, it said the following: the Eiffenstein Tower is one of the most iconic landmarks in the world and an enduring symbol of France. The Eiffenstein Tower. It was, before it was speaking of the Eiffel Tower, and then it says the Eiffenstein Tower, which is clearly some sort of hallucination or made up stuff. And I looked it up, and there's no Eiffenstein Tower anywhere. It just sounds like, it just kind of made it German, maybe? The reason I'm telling you this is that a lot has been said about the Eiffel Tower, so I never expected AI to be wrong here, because it's not a long tail thing, speaking about the Eiffel Tower, right? But it's still hallucinated in the most spectacular way, in a completely unpredictable way. I'll tell you the reason for this. I said AI learns by example, but we need to ask ourselves, examples to do what? What is the task or the objective that we give AI, right? And this is where the problem starts. AI is given an objective. It's like, learn by example how to do this. And that objective is often not exactly what we want from AI, right? Because what we want from AI is very difficult to express even. So in the case of text generation, the objective is to autocomplete text, so to continue writing text in a way that is very similar to how humans write text based on your data, right? And that objective it's not exactly what we want from AI. What we want from AI is correct solutions to problems. It is facts, not like correct facts, not made up facts. We want AI to interpret text correctly. That is very different from saying, I want you to generate believable text or text that looks like what humans would have written. They do overlap, though, because in general, the most sensible way to autocomplete something is probably the truth, right? You would see online that whenever people speak about the Eiffel Tower, they say Eiffel Tower. They don't say Eiffenstein Tower. So the two objectives overlap, but they're not the same, right? And that's why the Eiffenstein Tower thing is okay, probably, to the eyes of AI, because it was trained with the objective of producing believable text. And honestly, if you told me there's a tower called Eiffenstein somewhere in, I don't know, in Germany, it does sound like something believable, right? Same thing with maths. When you ask ChatGPT to solve a mathematical problem, it often gets very, very confused and it just doesn't output the right answer. And this is, again, because it was not designed to do math, right? It was designed to do to create believable text. How are they trying to fix this? The same way whack-a-mole, create data manually, have people produce answers to common problems to try to align the outputs of AI to what we really want from AI, which is facts and correct solutions and all of that. This will not work, or not all the way, because it's not fixing the root of the problem, which is this objective that doesn't match what we really want from AI. I want to finish this episode with a case study. We will apply the things that we just discussed to the topic of self-driving cars, which is an industry that is in a little bit of trouble lately. Let me start with a personal story. In 2017, so it was a long time ago, I submitted my CV to websites, to job boards, and I had been working with AI for image analysis. So I was a pretty good candidate to work in the self-driving industry. So I got a few phone calls from recruiters that wanted to interview me for positions in companies trying to develop fully autonomous self-driving cars, and I refused. I was totally spoiled at the time because I had other options, and I decided to not even interview for one of those companies. And I had a chat about this with a professor at the time, and he told me, people were also afraid of planes back in the day, and even ordinary cars because you were sitting on a fuel tank. So it's kind of accusing me of being afraid of technology or something like that. But in reality, I thought it wasn't possible. I thought it was not possible to build a fully autonomous car that could drive itself anywhere, which is what these companies were promising. So I thought it was pointless to work in an industry that would never be able to produce what they were promising. The reason for that was the long tail. I thought there are so many situations that you will not have in your data that happen when you drive, and as humans, we're pretty good at reacting to those things. But with AI, it's just not going to work. You're not going to find enough examples of all the weird things that could happen when you drive. And the other thing was this misaligned objective. Self-driving cars are usually created by using AI that tries to guess what a human would have done based on data, right? You supply AI with a lot of data containing footage of people driving and the actions that they took, like, speed up, speed down, like steer left. And I thought, guessing what a human would have done is not the same as being a good driver. There are other components to it. So I thought it was going to be a big failure. So instead, I worked in a really, really dull industry, still within AI, but totally dull after that. And I thought it was a good choice because let's fast forward to 2024. There are a couple of scandals around self-driving cars. One of them, which I think is particularly relevant here, is a Waymo car. Waymo is one of the most important brands of self-driving cars. It belongs to Google. And there's this Waymo car driving down the street and it hits a tow truck. There's a tow truck towing a car and it just hits it. 10 minutes later, another Waymo car does the same and hits the tow truck. Now, what was Waymo's answer to this? It says that the tow truck had attached the car in a weird way, right? So the car wasn't towed in a common way, which proves my point, right? Which is that AI gets confused when it sees things that aren't in the data. There are no examples of this. And a human would be able to tell that you don't hit that tow truck, regardless of how it's attaching the car. Even if it's uncommon, we would have realized. But AI gets confused. So how did Waymo solve this? Well, they said they patched up the software, which I imagine is, again, manual examples of cars being towed in a weird way. And I had a discussion a couple of days ago, and someone told me, yeah, they fixed that. And then there's a problem with a snowman in the middle of the road. And the car gets confused because usually you don't find that in the middle of the road. And they fix it, but then there's another problem with a snowman wearing a certain type of hat, and it hasn't seen it. So it's like it's never ending, right? And the proof that they haven't found a solution to this problem is that it was revealed that Waymo has a control room with humans manually intervening when the cars get confused. But this happens very often, about 3 to 5 miles of driving, right? So it doesn't sound like they drive themselves all that much, these cars. What's even worse, Cruise, which is another company that produces self-driving cars, it's like they're the two most important ones are Waymo and Cruise. Cruise revealed that they have more people in the control room than they have cars. So for every car allegedly driving itself, there are 1.5 people employed at a control room to intervene when the car gets confused. Someone said it may have been easier to just hire people to drive instead of spending billions on developing this technology that doesn't work. Actually, 200 billion, that's what's been invested so far in the industry. So what are the consequences of all this? First, AI will continue to be unreliable. We need to understand AI will be unreliable. Not all the time, right? It's very, very useful and it produces the right output a lot of the time, but because it randomly hallucinates, it is unreliable. which means that AI needs a lot of babysitting. Let me read a phrase from a person on LinkedIn who is a software developer. And he says, "Is it just me, or is AI-based code generation stuck at 80%? It gets the easy 80% done, but then I spend way too much time explaining what to fix, tweak, or add until I eventually give up and write the whole thing from scratch." So AI will be used as an assistant. It will be helpful for a lot of things, but it will be a lot harder for AI to replace humans completely because of this problem with reliability. One of my predictions is that a lot of AI startups will fail horribly. It will be a bloodbath. And the reason for it is that these startups promise reliability. They build a product that promises to do it for you. They say AI for lawyers, it will write your contract, right? Or AI for even interior design, it will design your room. I tried it and it added windows where I didn't have windows. No. But anyway, I think companies that present themselves as reliable, they will fail. Now, some companies will present themselves as AI for assistance, AI to help you spot the things that maybe you missed, and I think those have higher chances of success. Another thing I want to say, so we finish on a more philosophical note, is that societal gains of AI will not be that great because of the reliability issue. Some people have said that AI will increase GDP, which means make our economies more productive. But I don't see that happening, or not in a big way, because of all the babysitting that we need. That's all for today. Thanks a lot for watching or listening. I will be here soon with more content. If you have any questions, please reach out. Thanks a lot.